everybody's worried about, offending a creative person, like we have super thin skin. But really, I've never known anyone that's really good at advertising or that's really good at design that doesn't want to solve the problem, that doesn't want to solve the business problem, that would put their own needs ahead. It doesn't work for you that way. You won't be in business very long if you are that way.
Lost yours. You got a seat at my table. You got a hope. Here's somebody who believes you. Let truth remind you. You've always got a place to go to. You got a home.
Welcome to The Creator's Journey. I'm your host, Charles Gupton. Each week, I'll talk with creative leaders who face the same fears and obstacles we all face. What makes these folks effective are the processes they've developed that allow them to push through the darkness to consistently ship their work and make a difference. If you've ever felt that your fears and insecurities are getting the best of you, know that you're not alone. Every creator who works from the heart faces the same challenges. Come join our community at thecreatorsjourney.com for ideas and inspiration that will bring light and direction to your journey.
Here's the key to my front door. Got a pillow if you lost yours. You got a seat at my table. You got a home. Here's somebody who believes you. Let truth remind you. You've always got a place to go to. You got a home.
My guest today is Steve Sandstrom, the founder and executive creative director of Sandstrom Partners in Portland, Oregon, one of the leading branding and design firms in the U.S. Clients have included Converse, Nike, Coca-Cola, Tazo Tea, Miller Brewing, Bacardi, ESPN, Levi Strauss, Nissan, and Sony Pictures. And that's just a few of them. The firm has been featured in nearly every major publication covering branding and design, including Graphice, Communication Arts, Adweek, How, Creativity, One Magazine, and the New York Times Magazine. Steve currently serves on the board of directors for the One Club and has hauled in an endless stream of awards and recognition for his work over the last 2 decades. And to top it off, he's a cool guy to chat with. So welcome, Steve.
Thank you, and good morning. It's sunny and going to be 80 degrees here today, so your life is good in Portland, Oregon.
Good for you. It's nice when it's sunny in Portland.
The rare time that it is.
If you had to make a road trip driving across country, coast to coast, and you could take 2 people with you for conversation and company, who would you ask and why?
I think David Brooks, columnist for the New York Times. I think, he is. He's just an amazing thinker, fascinating guy, and honestly, probably wouldn't even need another person in the car. And maybe Peter Wagner, who's a friend and has been a creative collaborator in the past, and maybe one of the most intelligent people I've ever known. Because just the banter between the two of them would allow me to sort of sit in the back seat and take notes endlessly.
That's the way to do it. Bring along great people and just absorb.
Yeah, be a lifetime of learning in one trip. It would be really, truly, I think it would be a lifetime of learning for me in one trip.
Yeah, I'm getting to the point where I just want to be around people who have good thinking, know how to articulate it, and then just sit and listen.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of influential people, who are 3 people who've had great influence or the greatest influence in your life, and what did they do to have that impact in your life?
That's also very complicated because there are so many. I think I was a really fortunate kid in high school because I had a couple of sort of I had a few actually kind of father figures that were teachers, coaches. My high school art teacher was sort of this amazing Renaissance man. His name was Robert Bordwell. He studied photography with Minor White. And when I took photography classes from him, we actually made our own chemicals. We made our own developers from scratch, and they were Minor White's formulas. So that was pretty fantastic. He also, if you wanted to learn animation, if you wanted to learn sculpture, if you wanted to learn to work with plastics, if you wanted to learn calligraphy, which I did, he taught that as well. So
wow,
pretty remarkable individual, fascinating. He actually, as a fairly young man, he won a Man of the Year Science Award in the state of Oregon for tracking Sputnik photographically. He helped create the invention of photo silkscreen, but had to discontinue because the lacquer thinner would paralyze him. So, so I had this guy as my high school art instructor, and by the way, he studied calligraphy with a man named Lloyd Reynolds, who taught calligraphy at Reed College here, and that's who Steve Jobs refers to in his commencement speech to Stanford back in like 2008 or so. So as a sophomore in high school, I was taking calligraphy classes that were basically the same calligraphy classes that students at Reed College were taking.
How incredible!
And from one of from a guy who had been mentored by the guy that introduced hand lettering back into the United States at the time, Lloyd Reynolds. So a pretty incredible opportunity for me just to be, I was in suburban Portland, kind of nowhere really. And to have like an individual like that in your life and to sort of teach you and support you and promote you and give you confidence. And we listened to Alan Watts lectures during photo classes.
That's amazing.
Yeah, pretty amazing. So there was Robert Bordwell, pretty foundational to who I am. I think even there's a guy named Wes Cook who was my cross country and track coach, and also for a few years, and then he was replaced by a guy named Jim Anderson. Both of them were teachers first, right? But they coached because they loved to do that, and I was just a skinny, scrawny gang, but running is something I could do, and didn't require as much athleticism as some of the other sports, and so trying to overcome fears and to sort of get a competitive spirit going, and to be a long distance runner is to endure a lot of pain and your head working against you considerably. And so, I think of those people as being pretty fundamental to actually what I do today still. And there's a lot more, but they were the first.
It's so amazing how frequently it is a teacher or a series of teachers that had such a profound influence on people's lives, which still is incredible to me to think about how little we appreciate in terms of financially and other rewards to teachers, but yet what an incredible impact they have on our lives.
Yeah, I always felt like it was such a ridiculous. We have lots of distortions in our society, but that's one that seems, obviously off kilter. Now, on the other hand, the impact that they have and the good that they provide, it should probably not only be one of the highest paid endeavors, but also should be really hard to be able to get to do that job. It seems like to be a teacher shouldn't be any less difficult than to be a doctor or a lawyer or whatever, and yet it's easier.
Agreed.
Education-wise. So that doesn't mean that they're all fantastic, but boy, the ones that are committed and the ones that really are driven and really are passionate can make, unbelievable impressions and impacts on people's lives moving forward. And that is truly a shame. I always respect and admire those people, especially the ones that I meet that are super passionate about that and have given their lives to it, because they're smart enough to do many other things.
Absolutely agreed. Yeah, we're of one heart on that. I want to touch on something you mentioned in terms of running that you struck a chord. Has there ever been a time in your life where you felt like you were a misfit, that you didn't quite align with all the folks around you? And if so, how did that impact your connection with people and where it's brought you today?
Yeah, misfit. Well, I was a tiny kid, so I'm over 6 foot, and I'm just under 200 pounds. I'm maybe just above average in terms of scale as a guy. But as a kid growing up, I was one of those 4 that would sit in the front row when they took the class picture, cross-legged on the ground below, because I was tiny, under 5 feet tall as a freshman in high school. So under 100 pounds. So for a lot of my life growing up, I was just a misfit because I was puny, or one of the smallest of the friends that would be hanging out. And so I guess there was a bit of a misfit there. Later on in my life, and I kind of credit this back to maybe my high school and some of my college experiences, that because I was talented, I could always draw, because I had that gift, and because I could apply it in so many ways. It seemed like my friends were always older than me, and sometimes considerably older than me. Like my friends could be easily twice my age. And so for the longest period of time, I did find myself as being the person that was sort of the youngest in the room of the group of people that were hanging out. So I'm not really sure if I felt like a misfit necessarily, but I did recognize the fact that the issues and the things that people were talking about were things I hadn't quite yet experienced in my life, because I just didn't have that time yet, right? And now it's funny because now I'm older than most of my clients. And so I feel in some ways kind of a misfit on the other degree, where now I actually have more experience and sort of more understanding of things that have happened or could happen and aren't as scary as maybe they think they are, from the other,
right.
Just from the other side. So it's an interesting transition.
How do you think that time with the friends that were so much older affected where you are now in terms of your perspective, or growing you in relation to how you now work with, I'm assuming, the people that work in your office as well as some of your clients, in terms of your experience?
It's hard to say. There's so many influences, and there's so many people that you meet, and there's so many working relationships, professional and personal, that or non-functional relationships that shape who we are. And